Those of you I've not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Tzuki, and as Nikita says, along with my business partner, Georgie Fienberg, I run Exceptional Leadership Technology. We are a data-driven advisory firm. We partner with CEOs and boards across the whole leadership lifecycle, from assessment and selection through to individual and executive team development, through to succession planning. And we also work a lot with PE investors to conduct leadership due diligence, both pre and post deal. And Hogan data underpins everything we do. So do humor me for the next 15 minutes as a Hogan fangirl. You're not going to hear about any other psychometric. And I've just found that the nuance and rigor and depth of the Hogan suite, we use HPI, HDS, and MVPI, is unrivaled to help with the challenges and opportunities that our clients come to us for help with. So for those of us who have worked with Hogan, I imagine many of us have been in this position. A brilliant Hogan debrief is being delivered. There's been hours of thoughtful analysis on the part of that practitioner. There's deep reflection going on either side. Maybe a few light bulb moments happening in the room. And then the report gets filed and life moves on. And it's not that the insights weren't powerful. In our experience, the insights are incredibly powerful. It's just that for most organizations, ones we work with, Hogan is still seen as a high accuracy, relatively expensive, relatively kind of complex to administer, one-off intervention. Usually for a particular use case in mind, maybe a hiring decision, maybe a bit of coaching or development. And it really lives in the domain of the individual. And we just observe time and time again, the organizations that invest in that data then missing out on a gold mine of information and insight and data. Every Hogan profile, at my last count, gives you 156 data points on someone. So if you aggregate that up across many, many profiles, you can start to build a system-wide view of your organization, the culture it creates, how it makes decisions, where the risk spots lie. It's 152 opportunities to ask game-changing questions like, what has made this senior team successful to date? And when the pressure is on, what can we predict in this data? Where are they going to default and fail? And then where are the counterpoints in that team that we can harness and we can bring to the fore and make sure they have their voice heard that will neutralize that risk in this team? Which pairings are going to create outsized value in this team because they're very different? And equally, which pairings amplify blind spots? I'm thinking of lovely low prudence clusters with very high bold, very high generates ideas, not a lot of execution you could probably expect from that cluster there. Now, most organizations never get to those answers, and they actually never get to those questions. And it's not for lack of effort, and it's not for lack of desire. Again, in our experience, we just see lots and lots of practical barriers that really make scaling Hogan data across the organization very challenging. So let's go back to that exec who was having their debrief, feeling really inspired when they left the room. Well, a few months later, she's got a lot of challenges on her plate. Maybe she's got a tough hiring decision. Maybe she's preparing for a tense one-to-one and doesn't know how to navigate that. Maybe she's got a particular project she needs to kick off in her team. She doesn't know who to put on that working group. She's casting her mind back to that debrief thinking, I felt really illuminated at the time, and yet it's kind of hazy now what I learned. And you know what? I can't really apply it to what I'm dealing with right now. And it was just about me. I don't have any insight on the people that I'm working closely with. Meanwhile, for the psychs working in that organization, the Hogan accredited practitioners who are champions of that data, well, they are no better served. There's no way to store that data centrally. We've got reports and spreadsheets spread across inboxes and shared drives and different networks. We've got no easy way of rolling up views across teams. We've got no shared common language in the business. We've got no way of sharing insights with our colleagues in an easy way. And when the business does want some analysis on that juicy data you've got, welcome to Manual City. You are in spreadsheets, you are in PowerPoints. Hi.
Manual City came up. We looked at with a visceral reaction.
Exactly. It's time consuming, it's manual, you're just in the weeds and it just takes so much time and it's a little bit painful. So we saw this net effect happening over and over again. And we just said, why is this the case? Because you have the data. You've already invested in the data, but it's like it's trapped. And we just saw that the value is leaked between the debrief and the decision. And so we asked ourselves, what if the data didn't stay trapped, gathering dust in that PDF? What if the data could be accessible on demand, usable easily, and available to drive real conversations at the moment at which they need to happen? And that's how we found ourselves building this platform that I'm worried Nikita slightly oversold by the most innovative thing he's seen in 12 years, because yeah, okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Now, the platform, we developed an earlier version, which we're going to hear about how Penny and her team at SJP have used it. We're currently developing an upgraded version of it, which is being built in Berlin as we speak, very excitingly. I can show you a couple of screenshots just to bring it a little bit to life. But I guess one of my key points I feel very passionately about is this platform is not designed to replace the practitioner. In this time of AI, there's this idea of just AI can do it. And especially when you're dealing with data, right? It feels like that's the natural thing that we can get AI to analyze. And I and Georgie and everyone we work with feel very, very, very passionately about this. Data is nuanced and rich and deep, but it can be misused and misinterpreted. And so you do need that human in the loop who has got the context of the environment that that data is being interpreted in. And so this platform does not replace a practitioner. It's built for the practitioner. It's built with you in mind, and myself. I kind of built for myself, and hopefully other people can use it and get value from it too. But yeah, it's built to empower you, to save you time, to make analysis kind of expedited and easy. It doesn't do the analysis for you, but it gives you lots of prompts to work with, so you're not starting from a blank piece of paper every time. It facilitates presentations, so you want to share those insights. So yeah, it's very much built to empower for the practitioner, and it doesn't run without the practitioner. So I guess maybe this is the time when I can just show you a little flavor of it. It's not that exciting, but it does its job. So if you are the practitioner, if you're Hogan accredited, and to have an admin seat for the system, you do need to be Hogan accredited. So we know you have the skills and the requisite experience to interpret it. This is where you land. This is your control center. You can view data on demand. That's an individual. You can do a pairing of colleagues. You can look at a team or even the whole organization. If you're presenting, so maybe you're on a call with a senior leader and you just want to keep the information really high level, you can have a look at that team's anchors just on a kind of clean presentation page. And then you can go into analysis mode where you get into the juicy subscales. Only you get to see those because there's big power in there. So you have to be, a qualified Hogan administrator to be able to see that. And this just gives you a sense of what you'll see if you go onto that analysis tab for an individual. Atticus Maple, our developers had some pretty funky names in the mix for the mock-ups. There are stranger ones. But you can see here, we are not a Hogan product, but we appreciate that the audience that is using this, they are Hogan experts, and therefore we wanted to feel familiar and intuitive to use. So we've gone with the kind of brand colors. And a little bit like, I think it was maybe Dan and Lily were saying about the importance of range. And rather than saying you are this number, we're trying to kind of draw out that you're going to, you have a number that's placed you, but there's going to be range in that, and you can flex up and down. There's some adaptability in there. Just to kind of give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the other items, the user details, it's very easy to set up users and upload the data. You can have a look at the data. You can't see it because it's behind the laptop, but you can go into the subscales there. Your private notes section is where you can start making notes and analyzing that individual ahead of a debrief or a report. And leadership levers I'm very excited about. Again, we've been hearing about the power of translating Hogan data and Hogan scales into the language of a particular business, because that's where it gets really, really, really impactful, is when you're not saying, oh, you're really high on prudence and you're really low on, it's when you say, we have 5 leadership behaviors and we can kind of map you on spectrums, and you can know where you're trying to get to if you want to be promoted, or if you've had some feedback that you need to look at something. So we're very passionate about translating from Hogan into your own individual organizations, frameworks and languages. And this just gives you an idea of the kind of presentation mode, which is, it's still quite a lot going on, but it's a little bit simpler in that you could have that up on your screen, debriefing a very senior exec about their team, pointing out where are the anchors of that team. And if you want to deep dive into any of those, you can click on any of the scales and it will take you through to show where your team is mapped on that particular scale. And I think maybe now is a really good time to pause, because what we've been hearing about this morning and what we hear about a lot is the sharing of data. And it's a really, really interesting one, because we found that it's all in the framing. Now, psychometric data inherently sounds a little bit scary. It sounds deeply personal, and it can be quite exposing, right? If you see it in that way. And that's where the people start, right? When they're thinking, well, I don't want people to see my data, it's my personal data. But we, at Exceptional Leadership, we have a philosophy around Hogan data that's quite different from that, which is there are no good and bad Hogan scores. There are no scales you universally want to be high on or universally low on. It's absolutely to do with the role, the context, the organization, that environment in which you're operating, and around your own self-awareness and ability to know where you are on that scale and what the impact can be. And so we think there is value and risk in being at any position on any scale. There is no good or bad. And that's what we try and draw out here, that there, don't look too closely at the text because it is placeholder. So I can't guarantee that's actually correct. It's just to give you an idea. But the idea is that you can be low on ambition, and there's huge value in what you can bring to that team and what the strengths are of that, and equally with high. And for both, there are risks, right? You don't want to overplay it. So it's this idea of there's no good or bad. You want to be high on this, or you want to be on low on that. And you see, we have people's names there. And what we tend to do with the platform is when we go in and work with a client in procuring it, we start with that framing. You only get your data in the system once you've had your debrief and you've kind of got comfortable with that framing, I suppose. And then if you still don't want your data shared, that's fine. We can have permissions where only the psychs who are qualified to administer the system can see your data. You can have your data in there but anonymized. And you can also not have your data in there at all. So we've made it very, very flexible, and we can meet the organization where they are in terms of openness and sharing that data. But the key thing is, it's like, stop seeing it as exposing data and start seeing it as the ingredients for individual and collective growth, because that's what it is if it's used in the right way. So as I say, the main user that we want to delight with this system is psychs and Hogan accredited practitioners in ideally, very big organizations that are struggling to scale this. But we also want to serve John. Now, John, he's not an org psych, he's not Hogan qualified, but he's a senior exec and he's had his Hogan done. And how can John continue to get value after the debrief? So John can log in after his debrief and he's able to see his own data whenever he wants. He's also able to put himself in a pair with a colleague. So if they're kind of clashing over something, you can suddenly start to surface where that might be coming from and start to have a productive conversation around it. He can see his own team and other teams that he might be part of, and he can also see the organization's data. So the non-Hogan qualified users get much more restricted functionality and viewing, because obviously they don't have, again, those skills and experience we were talking about, but they should have access to their data to use it for their own personal and professional development. And that's something that John can see. He can see his own data there. And for that kind of refreshment point, you can scroll down, look at where he is in recognition, what his range is, and then you can't see it on this, but there'll be some natural language descriptions of what being high in recognition and low in recognition, kind of how that shows up. Again, the benefits of that and what you need to be aware of. So it's just that kind of refresher to keep getting value from the data after you've had your debrief. And here you can see, again, if you place yourself in a pair, you can see where you're both low on a particular anchor, and so you're going to share a certain worldview equally with a high anchor that you might share. And then you can see where you're very divergent, and therefore where you might find yourself clashing or not seeing things the same way. But also, that tells you that's who you need to work with, because if you can start seeing each other as you call it your foil, don't you? Where it's like, go and find someone that thinks very differently from you on this, and start to harness that cognitive diversity between you, because it's productive. It's not challenging. I think that's actually, oh yeah. And then we've got, for the team, you can start seeing where you are across a certain scale as well. So there's lots and lots and lots that I could show you, but I kind of don't want to just bore you with screenshots. We can always follow up on this. Now, it's very exciting, but for me, technology is only cool and interesting if practically it's making change in your day-to-day life. And so that's why I get really excited about this. And actually, that's why I've so happy to have Penny here, who has used it in anger, an earlier version of it, to talk about practically what does this actually enable. But for what we've seen working both with it ourselves, so we deliver work for our clients, but also for the ops psychs who are using it in-house. You know, we go back to that exec that we've met a couple of times. Now, in the flow of her day, in the flow of her meetings, she can pull up her mobile app at any point, pull up her data, pull up her colleagues' data on cue when she needs it, for whatever reason that is. And she knows that she's looking at the same view that you're looking at and you're looking at and you're looking at. So you've got a shared language and a shared frame of reference here. And then we've seen how hiring can shift as well. So before we were kind of guessing on fit in interviews, which are obviously, you know, got lots of biases going on there, but you're guessing on fit, you're blindly reference checking. Well, now if you profile and assess your incoming senior leaders, which lots of organizations do, with the appropriate privacy toggles on, you can put candidate A into the team that might be joining and update in real time. What is the impact on that team of that candidate? What is the second order ripple effect of them leading this team? What might happen to the psychological safety of that team? What happens to the pace of decision making? And then you can port candidate A out and pop candidate B in and do the same process. You can do that what if modeling on the fly. And then if we think about team dynamics, all those patterns that people can sense in a team, but they can't make visible, or they can't talk about, suddenly they're visible. You can start to, again, reference that same set of data together, and you can start to identify those shared strengths in the team, the blind spots you have, the collective tendencies to overplay, how you might be perceived by other teams, what's it like to work with you? And as I say, those kind of interpersonal tensions are suddenly, you can have a healthy conversation and pinpoint, does it come from a difference in beliefs and values? Does it come from a difference in style? You can start to just identify what's driving that. And then for culture, well, the most anecdotal and nebulous thing that is out there, you can start to see what makes up your culture and steer it, I guess, when you've got that insight. So I think that's probably enough from me. Is there anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so, because I'm just the warm-up for Penny. I'm very excited to hand you over to Penny Lucas, who is Head of Leadership at St. James's Place. As I say, she's been using an earlier version of the app. And why I'm so excited to have her here today is because at Exceptional Leadership, we had a vision, which is to transform Hogan data from being a one-off event to being a continuous intelligence tool across a business. And Penny's managed to bring that to life. So over to you, Penny.
Thank you so much, Tzuki. I'll pay her later because that is the best introduction I've ever had. Yes, my name is Penny. I'm Head of Leadership at St. James's Place. I'm joined here today by my colleague Peter, who will be heckling from the third row. So as Head of Leadership, we work with our board, our directors and our most senior leaders every day to help them to become high-performing leaders leading high-performing teams. We have two engines which drive our data-informed strategy at SJP. The first is emotional intelligence. Layman's terms, who am I? How do I make other people feel? And psychological safety. How can leaders create the conditions where three things that you and I care deeply about happen? And they are high performance, healthy corporate culture, and good client outcomes. So Hogan data powers both of those powerful engines for us at SJP. And I have to say that the Exceptional Leadership app is my perhaps now not so secret weapon. So SJP engaged Exceptional Leadership about 5 years ago. The Exceptional Leadership app took Hogan assessments from being a valuable report to a scalable, sustainable, and enterprise-wide game-changing leadership development initiative. Suddenly, we had a common shared language around personality, potential, and performance. And we had the data at our fingertips to back it up. As a business, we developed a shared appreciation for cognitive diversity, and we achieved a level of transparency and willingness to share reports and profiles that is the envy of most of my leadership contemporaries. But we had some barriers to overcome, and you've alluded to some of them, so I'm going to talk to three of them. The first is paradigms. I think it's human nature to try and equate Hogan data or any psychometric data for that matter to tools that people are already familiar with. I love to tell people that when it comes to Hogan, you're not an animal or an acronym or a color. The app makes a comprehensive and scientifically robust psychometric assessment accessible for everyone. Cognitive diversity is, I believe, the jewel in the Hogan crown, and I put that jewel in our leaders' hands every day. The second barrier to overcome, I think, is scalability and sustainability. And a common criticism of psychometrics is that they're not scalable. And we've heard about spreadsheets today already. So this is where the app comes into its own. It's accessible on your phone. And once people have received their feedback, they can continue to access and reference and explore Hogan for themselves and across the business. Our CFO told me recently that she uses the app daily to access and to get the most out of her one-to-ones as she's thinking about running her ELT meetings and to engage with colleagues that she would previously have been mystified by. And then transparency, I think, is the third barrier that you're trying to overcome with a tool like Exceptional Leadership's app. And I believe you must start at the top. Courageous leadership, I hope you agree, requires vulnerability and authenticity. And it is our CEO and our board who led the way by sharing their data. And they set a powerful precedent. I'm pretty sure every time everybody gets onto the app, the first person they compare themselves to is Mark Fitzpatrick. I know I did. But of the 800 colleagues whose data we have in the app, which we've amassed over the last 5 years, I can think of 3 people who are unwilling to share. So, the game-changing difference. Well, to be really honest with you, I cannot imagine doing my job without this app. The ability for a practitioner like myself to quickly aggregate Hogan data for a team and see their shared values, their ways of working, their problem solving, their decision making, and how they're likely to behave under pressure is gold. Being able to challenge a group of my most senior stakeholders with their groupthink risks, their inclination to be silently frustrated and stubborn, leisurely, anyone, their propensity to leave the difficult conversations unsaid, or perhaps to enjoy ideating and creative problem solving to the point that they fail to implement and execute is powerful. We all know leaders are time poor, and yet the feedback that we receive is that time spent using the app is both insightful and informative, frighteningly accurate, and very action-oriented. And the NPS for the leadership development that we deliver at SJP sits at around 76. After I've shared the common themes with the data themes with a group, perhaps, I'll sit back and say, so what? I mean, this is what the data says, but who cares? And then it's over to them. A recent example I had with a senior team that I worked with 2 months ago is I looked at their aggregated data and I saw something rather alarming. I had a very, very senior leader who was very, very low prudence, and he had a very, very low prudence senior leadership team. So I revealed this fact in the data, which they readily acknowledged, and led a powerful discussion about the impact that this has on the teams below them and their stakeholders. So I was then able to sort of, using the app, hold the mirror up and really address some of the reality of what it's like to work for that team. Because whilst that team see and experience enormous amounts of agility, the people who are working for them are experiencing a lack of direction. And whilst there's great flexibility, which is admirable, for others, it's often experienced as chaos. And when it comes to tolerance for ambiguity, these guys are up for change, and that's awesome, but everybody else feels like there's no plan. So it's impacted the way they engage with the higher prudence people in the teams around them and in the stakeholder groups around them. And the recruitment they recently undertook to fill a team vacancy. But it's not about finding the right person to plug a gap. It's about encouraging something we referred to earlier, intentionality and adaptability, which are the hallmarks, I believe, along with some other traits of really great leaders. So last week, our CEO stopped me in the corridor and said, "So Penny, I know you were working with that team. How'd it go?" And I shared with him what I'd been able to show from the app. And he responded, "Penny, that's music to my ears," which of course is music to mine. So in conclusion, from a practical perspective with the app, at SJP, we have a common language and a unifying way of thinking about leadership, brand, and reputation, and a willingness to be open and transparent about areas of strength and opportunities for development. Leaders have their data at their fingertips, and their team composition and performance is just a click away. The app impacts every aspect of the leadership journey at SJP, from recruitment to development. We use it in our academy and in Succession. We use it to drive high performance, to assemble project teams and working groups, and to look at insights for directorate and company-wide values data and things like that. The app keeps development alive long after my team and I have left the room. And I think that's really one of the most profound things. Culturally, thanks to the app, we have developed an expectation that data-informed development is normal. As soon as a new person joins a team, they're like, "Right, Penny, tell me what does this show me?" And they get the app open. We leverage cognitive diversity and belonging and inclusion, which enables those wonderfully high-performing teams. And I know that the app has really resulted in a learning mindset amongst our leadership community. I love my job, you might be able to tell, but the Exceptional Leadership app allows me to leverage the Hogan psychometric to deliver data-informed, meaningful, and sustained leadership development at SJP. Thank you.
So first of all, can we have a round of, there will be time for 1 or 2 questions, don't worry, but I think something like this deserves an extra round of applause. So can we have an applause for Tzuki and Georgie for developing something innovative? And can we have, a special round of applause for Penny, because so rarely you meet somebody with so much courage to roll out a psychometric on such a big scale.